My name is Dr. Kim Welch. I'm an instructional designer for ASU Ed Plus, and I'm here with Dr. Bernadette Curie. She's an instructional designer for USIU Africa again, and this interview topic is to explore a framework for creating an instructional design organization and finding or developing staff. And really it's more methods than a framework, just methods for creating. We're going to hit a couple of points. It's really building capacity in instructional design. First, we want to talk about fostering or building instructional designers, so the individuals. And then we want to talk about developing networked relationships for the instructional design process. So how do you network that into the institutional system, and then integrating the instructional design process within the institution so it becomes something that people know about and they're going to use. And I'm going to start with a question just about Dr. Curie. How did you become an instructional designer?
How did I become an instructional designer? It's a long story, but I'll keep it short. So my professional life started with teaching, and initially I taught mathematics and business studies at a high school. I moved on to computer studies, and at that point I had to do a diploma in computer applications and computer systems. So thereafter, I fell in love with technology, especially technology that could help in education. Around the year 2010, I decided to pursue a master's degree, and I knew that it had to be something to do with educational technology. So when I looked around, I found a master's degree in educational communication technology, and I went for it. And it made me see an opportunity to teach ICT integration in teaching and learning. And what kept me going was the immense possibilities of how ICT integration in teaching and learning could actually demystify abstract and difficult concepts in a classroom environment for the learners. And I was definitely having an impact by teaching my colleagues and everyone who really cared what I had learned in that particular environment. So I started to interact with both in-service and pre-service teachers at some point, and I knew that would have a greater impact. And thus I decided actually to pursue a degree in educational technology, a PhD in educational technology, so that I could teach at the university and have a greater impact. And it was when I was doing my PhD that I really got to know about instructional design, especially from online communities of practice with international membership. And I fell in love with it. And from then on, I went on to teach educational technology units at 2 universities where I was working before I actually joined USIU. Then the pandemic hit, and with the indefinite closure of institutions came the urgent need to move teaching and learning online. And so together with colleagues in a university where I was teaching at that time, I came up with 2 courses and trained many in-service teachers so that they could move their content to online. And we did that successfully. On the side, I also helped a few other institutions to move online. And that actually called for instructional design skills. And I started to realize that these opportunities were actually there to become an instructional design in Kenya eventually. I was keen to remain in the education sector. And so when USIU Africa advertised for an instructional designer, I applied. The interviews were many, rigorous, but I made it. And I have been an instructional designer for the last 6 months.
Excellent. They're so lucky to have you. And what I like is that you have, like me, you went through the technology route to find the instructional design path. All right, so after your great training, I want to know how you would recommend institutions build their individual instructional design team.
So strong leadership and conviction in online education is the best way to start. Because once that is in place, then it becomes very easy. And the idea is to check and see who it is you have in a team already, even as you start to build an instructional design team. Because usually in an organization, there will be some people who can be trained into some positions, especially if they have, specific characteristics that one is looking for, and they are able to undertake certain specific roles. That would be the best. But you can also see who you need to hire. But on that, you also need to be aware that some professionals, like instructional designers, are difficult to come around. So really the idea of grooming people who are already within the institution is the best. However, if you start small but sure, everything, will grow from that.
I love that. Yep. And I think that is, you get to see the skills that are already there, bring them together and make sure the parts and pieces work. So as I say that, my next question for you is, what relationships are important to build a strong instructional design team? And maybe you can start from where you are right now and maybe some of the things that you're hoping to do to build your team.
Okay. So when I came into USIU, really, I'm the first instructional design there, and there has never been any other. And so the role of an instructional designer was not very clear to many people, and that is understandable. Faculty had never worked with an instructional designer. And so it called for building relationships. And how did I start? I started with just helping people in whatever they needed in this online learning space. And from there, conversations would actually come up and we would end up in instructional design. And sometimes my director, the one I report to, my immediate director, can actually bring some people directly to me, and we hit it off with a conversation, and I explain how instructional design can actually help the subject matter experts. I managed to convince them, and many of them are now excited, and we're building relationships, and I am sure it can only get better.
Excellent. And with that, so we're talking relationships, and you probably have relationships that you have to build also with, for instance, your tech team and, other support. And I've been at that level where you're doing the instructional design thing on your own, but you're also taking on different roles. What's your plan for integrating the instructional design process within the university so that it becomes a thing that people do? So I use Arizona State as the example, where by now people know that when they come in, they're going to get, the master class and a lot of other assets and things to help them with their design process, instructional designers and things like that. That's part of the process. How do you plan to integrate that into the institutional process?
Okay. So USIU Africa right now already has an online learning policy. And this online learning policy actually has a whole section on the role of the instructional designer, what instructional design is all about, and kind of outlines how the instructional designer will work with faculty. So what we have to do right now is actually to actualize that policy, so that whatever is in the policy is what is happening on the ground for real. And that will take us some time. It will also call for quite a number of, developing of standard operating procedures or guidelines for different activities in relation to online teaching and learning activities. And I think once that is in place, then we are going to be in a good place to now, actually actualize and make instructional design the normal thing at the university.
Perfect. That's fantastic. And I love the way that you start with policy. I think that's where it often has to start, is policy, and then build from there and start getting a lot more, like by now we have a 40 some odd page document that tells people how to design their courses and, how to work with their instructional designers. And so I think that is the maturation process of instructional design in a system.